Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of the Backyard Banter Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, as I am every time we get together and do this. We've got a great episode today with a really great, fantastic guest that I know very well. But before we get to that individual, I have to tell you that today's podcast is sponsored by RealitySportsOnline.com, a powerful fantasy platform that lets you manage your team like a real-life general manager. Use the promo code BYB10 for 10% off the platform fee when you sign up. That's BYB followed by the numbers 1 and 0. Now, I mentioned we have a great guest today, and if you're one of the 5 people that watches the YouTube broadcast of these episodes, you'll notice that I'm wearing my headband because I didn't even want to try to look attractive for today's episode because we have by far the best looking guest that the Backyard Banter Podcast has had so far, and that's not a slight to some of the other attractive individuals we have had on, but we have NFL Network's own Patrick Claybon, the news anchor extraordinaire, on with us today, and Claybon's a good friend of mine, so I'm definitely going over the top with the praise here. But I do mean it. I mean, Claybon is fantastic. But Mr. Claybon, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Matt, as you mentioned to the people who watch video versions of podcasts, I am located in somebody else's office right now because the newsroom is a little too crunk about the schedule announcement that's coming up tomorrow. Who's fired up about that? But yeah, I'm in. Shout out to Kat Smith. I'm in her office. I just finished doing an update, and yeah, it's you go way over the top in praise, being an extraordinarily attractive man who can casually stroke his beard like that, and make the folks swoon. Who's on the grind, doing the workout stuff. We'll get to that later. But yeah, it's good to be here. It's good to be here on the podcast.
It really is, and no doubt the newsroom is not a place for this. And we'll talk a lot about things of this nature. But I mean, how great was it to see everybody on Twitter make the same joke about the announcement of the announcement?
Yeah, it's an easy joke to make, and we had our dude Mike on the exercise ball. That was very jokeable as well. But hopefully, between all the basketball action tonight and the hockey action this week, if we can find a spot in people's minds to, that part of your mind that's thinking about the schedule right now, if we can bring that to people, then that's what we're hoping to do. And it sucks when signals get crossed and all that as far as getting it to people at the time when they're most concerned with it. But it's out, we'll get it out, and hopefully everybody will be happy with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the NFL has certainly mastered the craft, the art of never being ignored.
Yeah, it's like that the guy that you work with that's constantly there and having a conversation, and you can't not hear the conversation.
There's like 40 of those in our office.
And in offices around the country, but that's what we are. We're in the National Football League, as you know, Matt. We are the biggest and loudest, and our voice shall be heard.
We will not be ignored, and we're certainly not going to ignore the story of Patrick Claybon. So, Claybon, start us on the journey of how your bio on Twitter is great because, or at least last time I checked, and I don't do it every day, but last time I checked, it says it ends with "So I watch football." Obviously, your background is all about football. Tell us how you came to love this sport.
Mostly in the same way that everybody else did, and that's what's cool about working here is you see guys walking around. Deion Sanders was my absolute favorite football player, and so getting a chance to watch him and kind of take in and appreciate the game, a game that I never actually played. There were times, because I was a track guy, was looking around and considering SEC track schools. Actually, a fun fact about my college recruitment, I didn't qualify with the NCAA clearinghouse because of some grade discrepancies. And and so my first year I was going to be ineligible. Wound up going to Troy because of that, fell in love with it, fell in love with broadcast journalism. And that's when the football thing got started. Most intensely was in college, was doing school stuff for Trojan Vision News and working with the players. And then lo and behold, DeMarcus gets drafted in the first round, goes to the Dallas Cowboys. following his career. And so that was the bridge between Troy University and the NFL and college football in general for me. And I didn't know at the time because I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And so I get the first job in Dothan, Alabama, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of Alabama for those who aren't super aware of it. I get that job, and so I'm still covering Troy football. Then I'm covering Alabama and Auburn football, and here I am covering NFL football. So that's the lineage, and it kind of all starts with Larry Blakeney and the Troy Trojans and DeMarcus Ware and O.C. Manure and Leotis McKelvin, the guys I went to school with. Turn out to be the guys that I'm covering in the NFL now. So it's pretty cool the way that worked out.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. There's a lot of circuitous nature to the way that we all, come to love the game, and then suddenly you're working in it and you're like, oh wait, like I think there's been a few times like when I first got to NFL Network and like Nate Burleson walks by and I'm like, dude, I used to play as you in Madden. That's nuts. I don't know. I think this is Madden should sponsor the podcast. This is like the fifth time they've come up. Everybody talks about that. I don't play anymore though personally, but that's a topic for another day. But so you went to school for broadcast journalism to do what you do now, because that's kind of different from my path for sure, and other people that have been on the show.
Yeah, and that was a discussion that kind of lit up Twitter at a certain point last year. It was like, was J school worth it? And the answer to that, in really anything with any form of education, is, was it worth it to you? Because
Right.
everybody's going to have a different path, and everybody's going to have different opportunities. For me, I definitely wouldn't be here if not for the Hall School of Journalism at Troy University. But there's people that definitely went there that washed out. Its opportunity is going to be so different for everybody. I know that there's certain aspects of the way that I do things even now where, and you know this, like through working with me, a lot of times the first question out of my mouth is like, but why?
Yes.
Why do we do this? Like, we say this thing and we make, for example, like a player comparison or something like that. And it's like, well, what's the reason that we're doing this, and what's the reason that we're telling people this? And I think I got that in school and going through that process. That's not to say that it's the right way. There's definitely the way that a lot of things got ingrained into me into how to do the job, and so that's kind of my takeaway on the J school, no J school thing. Whatever gets you where you are, but as long as once you get there, you can point back and say, well, I did this and that helped me, and so yeah, shout out to the folks, the Hall School of Journalism. I appreciate it.
Yeah, if you don't follow Claybon on Twitter, I think that's, for one, it's a mistake. It's at Patrick Claybon. But you're right. That is something you often do on social media and even in your work with NFL Network. It's a lot of yeah, but why? And I appreciate that, because I think that I tend to be the same way. And like, some things become cliche for a reason in our industry, and like I think quarterback wins is a great one that I think becomes cliche for a reason, and then I know like the application of it is stupid, and maybe we won't get into a discussion here on quarterback wins, but I think the application of it is stupid and in a lot of ways, but there's a reason that it exists, because like the best, if you look historically, like all the good quarterbacks generally finish with better than 50% of the wins. I mean, that makes sense if you apply it in that way, but so like my point is, things become cliche for a reason, but other things become cliche and it just seems so stupid and like archaic, and we do it just because we always do. And that's something I appreciate about you, is that you are very much like, yeah, but why do we do that? And like not just accepting things for the way they are.
And I think it helps me knowing that, shout out Matt Harmon, at somebody who's under 25 years old, who's kind of already grasped all of this. You know what I mean? Because it took me a while to get there, and the natural inclination is to do what everybody else does, and it's like, oh well, this guy has a high football IQ, so he's good at. What does that mean?
Right.
Is he reading defenses more quickly than everybody else? What does that have to do with the system that he plays in? What does it have to do with the way he recognizes blitzes? I mean, the there's always a second question to ask, and now it's a little more easier for people to get to those questions now. And I think like things like your podcast and reception perception lead people to those questions, whereas before it was a lot harder to have your voice heard when you've got like something like a grade and it's a number, and people are like, oh well, how do you get to that number, versus, oh well, that player is bad. This is a bad football player, and that's what we generally have to accept. And I think people look into things a little bit more now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I say that a lot, especially now working for a big media company. The idea that it always seems like people want you to dumb down your content and like make it easy to like just spoon feed the idiots. And I hate that so much. Like, it's just completely not what I want to do as a creator.
Yeah, when you spoon feed people like that, what you do is like encourage being an idiot.
Yeah.
And so then you're the whole. It's like if you're serving people something at a restaurant, you want to serve the best food that you can possibly serve, because you want people to come to your restaurant. You don't want to just churn out ham and cheese sandwiches before they realize, wait, I can literally get this anywhere else.
Right.
I need
to eat, but that doesn't mean I have to eat garbage, or I have to eat like meh just because it's there.
Yeah, it's like people eating sandwiches are showing up on a spreadsheet, and somebody's like, well, look at this. Sandwiches sales are up 600%. So let's give the people sandwiches.
Right.
That's not helping people. It's not helping people understand food, and it's definitely not helping people understand football.
Yeah, it's certainly not, and it is something that, like, I've written a couple of the guys that and this is no shot to our Prospect Today series at NFL.com. Like, we do good stuff, and the guys have all done really good work there. But there's been a couple times, when I've written like a guy up for Prospect Today, and then also written him up on my website for reception perception, and just the depth that I can go into a little bit more. It's more freeing from a writer's perspective, and it's just like, but there's no reason like that audience wouldn't want this piece of content too, and that's I guess my point in this discussion is I appreciate always just going a little bit more. And like you said, that second question, because there's a couple times like people have asked me like, like we do the bullet points for Prospect Today because that's what people people understand bullet points, and that's fine. But you can, like you said, you can only answer the first question there, and then it's up to the analyst to take it into that second question.
And the hunger for that second question sometimes sends people in the wrong direction, because they see an article with the bullet points, and then they're like, but da 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 da, and they're going off on a lot of these things. And I know, Matt, you're like, well, yeah, like obviously I would sit here and write for 3 days on it. I can't. They won't let me do that. And
right.
It's always, the answer is always like somewhere in the middle. It's not like us pontificating on like the most mundane minutia of the game, but it's not player good, player bad either. And as long as people can talk on both sides, I think we'll eventually work towards the right way to do it. Hopefully.
Certainly. I think that we will. And it's a good point that the answer is somewhere in the middle, because you're right. Nobody wants to read, not many people want to read 10,000 words on, Michael Thomas's release from press or whatever, but most people also don't want Michael Thomas can't get off the jam. Okay, but what does that mean? Give me a little bit more. And so there's definitely some way, and I think it's up to it is up to the analyst to, as much as they're going to let you, give as much details as you can. Claybon, swinging back to you a little bit. So,
no.
Yeah, sorry, you have to do that. That's the point of this show. This is all actually an exercise in me working through my ego, making other people talk, and not myself, not being selfish on my end. This is actually all what this podcast is about, which I guess is inherently selfish. But anyways, so. Claybon, how did you get from, so you went to Troy, you got the, you did the whole broadcast journalism thing. What came next for you?
What came next? The first thing after graduating, absolutely nothing came. I could not get a job after sending my tape everywhere. I sent out like 47 tapes and got like a few responses. And so my decision was to return to Troy University, where I was a residence director already. And so my room and board were paid for, and so was half of my food. And I just decided to take two classes and paid for a couple of classes and stayed and worked at the J School. And then after that greatest year of my life, where I was just a college student who didn't have to really do too much, um, one of my friends turned down the job in Dothan, and elected to take a grad class. And the news director sent an email to our campus TV station and said, "Do you guys have anybody else?" And Aaron Taylor was kind of like, "Well, Patrick's been looking for a job for a year and a half," and it worked out. I got that job, and I was a bureau reporter in Dale County, Alabama, which sounds twice as awful as you could possibly imagine. I would have to cover train versus car accidents, a few meth lab murders, and there was always somebody that was grieving that I didn't want to have to try to talk to, but you have to because it's the nature of the job. And you'd be a pretty awful person. And then there were stories on, weed abatements, not marijuana, but actual weeds growing up in people's yards, where you go to talk to neighbors and they're like, "No, I can't be on TV." And I would get on my hands and knees and beg people to be interviewed, with me in Lower Alabama in August, wearing a shirt and tie, sweating. And I would just be begging people, carrying this camera and this tripod, to talk to me. And eventually I convinced somebody to take the job that was coming in. So I moved from the bureau to actual Dothan. So I was covering news in Dothan, which allowed me to shoot high school football games. And then when Chris Harris left to go to WSMV in Nashville, I was the weekend sports guy. And then Brad Sherwood left to take a medical job, and that left it open for me to be the sports director. And then I had this title, which Brad, for all intents and purposes, my first boss, my first sports boss, one of the best people in the world. I was just kind of pretending to do what he used to do, but I wasn't really that guy ever until I almost left. And so it was incredible. Just having the title, which is weird. The titles do so much for people, but just the way people approach you and the way people consider you in terms of looking for jobs and stuff, it does a lot more than it should. But yeah, once I got that job, then I got the job in Birmingham, which followed a similar path there and led me to here.
So take us there. How did the NFL Network thing end up happening?
Oh man, the NFL Network thing. The first thing that starts there is I had signed with an agency, and Mark Watts was then director of talent acquisition here at NFL Network. Saw me on a list, and they were launching NFL Now, and the idea was they were going to find, at the time, from what he had told me, was find 4 or 5 people to launch NFL Now with. And I came out with a big batch of people and was interviewing, and left the interview, did like some mock stuff with Elliot Harrison and some other stuff. Felt good about it. Left, and then 4 months later, I hadn't heard back. And at this time, as you know, Matt, my now wife, then girlfriend, Lauren, who was already working out here, and I was doing this nationwide job search, and I'd done an interview in Pittsburgh, and I came back. The folks in Pittsburgh were spectacular. It was a lot of Steelers stuff. The GM was one of the nicest GMs I'd ever met. And this whole time I'm thinking, they're going to offer me this job, and I can't really say yes because, I gotta get out there to Los Angeles, for the girl of my dreams. And turns out I call Mark Watts back, and he's like, "Yeah, they decided to go in another direction." And so at this point, I was the sports director in Birmingham, and I'm doing our SEC football plan, which for those of you who know is a pretty important thing down in that part of the country. And
Something of a big deal.
Yeah. And so I'm going through all the moving pieces of that. And I touched base back with Mark Watts, and he's giving me a pickup speech, because I was pretty down about it. And, at this point, I didn't really know what to believe in terms of what my opportunities would be. So I was like, well, if there's anything, just let me know. And he said, well, James Coe is leaving the news desk, and that might be a possibility for you. I'm like, I'll be there next Thursday. And so I came out here to see my wife, well, girlfriend at that point, and came by to do another interview. And a few weeks later, they offered me the job, which is like, what? Are you kidding me? And now I'm here. And honestly, Matt, like the way it worked out, just single thing. I maybe would have gotten the job a little bit earlier, but in terms of the job that I got and the opportunities that I've had, it's been incredible. And everybody the way it worked is not something that's common. And so, like, I just, hashtag blessed is something people throw out there a lot, but I'm really the luckiest person on the planet, just the way things happen.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that's a course that a lot of people seem to end up taking, that there's really no, like, science to this, that sometimes the universe just has to work in ways that you don't really understand it, and whether you're a person of faith or not or whatever, but sometimes life just seems to work out the way that it's supposed to work out. It seems like that was the case for you.
Yeah, and it always has been, because a lot of people in television, there's this idea, and some of the people listening to the podcast may understand it, and some it's a little bit different. But people talk about markets so much, and it's, oh, well, you worked at this market, and then you get a chance to work at this market. And to me, like, it always kind of felt like, well, they just have us on this little hamster wheel, and people take jobs that don't necessarily improve their quality of life, but because somebody sees that they work in a bigger city or a better market, it's like, oh, well, that's good. They've done something. And not to criticize anybody that leaves just for the sake of leaving a particular place, but I just never wanted to take a job from an outside perspective so that people would think more highly of me. I wanted to take jobs that I wanted to do. And that's really what led me, because I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I think that's what made things available for me to get that job, was because I waited until it was available. And a lot of people, we start out in TV on 2-year contracts. And the idea is, well, once your 2-year contract's up, you have to move in market, or you have to move up in market. Well, if the job doesn't get you to where you ultimately want to be, I don't know that there's always a reason to move unless you don't like your current situation. And so I stayed in Dothan for 5 years, and I stayed in Birmingham for 4 years. I'm really glad that I did, because both of those situations, they helped lead up to this one. And so I would just urge people, unless you're not happy, don't let other people from the outside determine how happy you should be with your job. That's got to be a you decision.
Right, almost like a don't rush it sort of phenomenon. Like, and that's why I always tell people, like, don't like, some, because people always want to know, like, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, don't listen to me. I don't just I like, this happened very quickly for me. It does not happen very quickly for most people. And I think that's a good point with your story. Like, sometimes you stay in a position that you're happy with because it's not an immediate jump to your long-term goal, and
yeah. And people will sometimes, like, try to look down on you based on your job, or like if you don't have a title that's appropriate enough. Like, there's probably some people here that have been condescended to that are listening now because they don't write for a good enough spot, or they feel like they don't have the clout score. It's really, things are honestly more about what you say and what you do than who you do it for, or what channel you're doing it on. If somebody's making good stuff, making good hashtag content, who cares where it's from?
Yeah,
it's good. And so, like, just, you gotta shine, no matter what star system you're in, or how bright the constellation is. if you shine, people are going to see you.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that like back when I started my website, nobody cared about what was on Backyard Banter, like, because what the hell is Backyard Banter anyways? I still don't really know, but
it's good is what it is.
It's definitely a lot better than I ever thought it was going to be. But now, like, I can put something up on Backyard Banter and people care about what it is and it's not because of the place or, and they don't care, like, they could care about it more than what's on NFL.com. You're right. It's not about the space that you put it on. It is about the brand and trust that you build up with your own readers or your viewers. And so much more about it is content. So yeah, if there's anyone listening out there that has ever felt that way, like, oh yeah, I write for a site that's kind of like, third, fourth, or fifth tier or whatever. Like, people don't care about that. If it's good and if you're good, you will eventually reap the rewards of that. In my opinion.
Yeah, just keep cranking it out. Just keep cranking it out, and then you can be Matt Harmon doing a fave to a work friend. So hanging out on the podcast, busting into somebody else's office.
Yeah, you never know. The possibilities are endless. So Claybon, speaking of possibilities, so now you are the news anchor. When there's breaking news, you're on top of it. You're there kind of wrestling the different reporters. Do you see this as like kind of what's the long-term goal, or is this the long-term goal?
This is because if once we kind of parallel with the stop in Dothan and the 4 years in Birmingham, I've just kind of done whatever it takes to try to help people get the best product that I can on the air, with my limited skill set. And
please stop.
Well, I mean, honestly, because I felt that, I never want to be asked to do more than what I can do. And what I can do is just try to talk to people and extract information on what has happened. And I feel like that's my skill set, whether it's, on the news desk or whatever they have for me. I'd like to be able to, talk to people and find out what's going on, because I feel like, especially in the NFL, there's a disconnect sometimes between player and fan, and that disconnect is, unfortunately, not to name names, but some people are kind of out of touch with understanding how a human might feel about a particular situation. And then it turns out that out of touch person could be a large mouthpiece for dictating how the fan feels about a particular football player. So ultimately, whether a player does something or doesn't do something that people agree with, I'd just like for people to understand at least the player's perspective, because I feel like that's my job, is to provide the perspective of the player so that fans can make their own decision based on what happened. And sometimes it seems like people lose that, and that's not a new thing. I'm not, crotchety old guy saying millennials have killed journalism, because journalism has been around forever and it's going to keep being around. But
if I can interject there and make the point, I think that actually what I think you see a lot more of is like you mentioned, millennials, and you and I have gone back and forth about about how ridiculous some of the anti-millennial discussion is. So I know we're probably on the same page here, but like my generation is much more sensitive than other generations past, and I think that you're seeing some of that like conveyed in what you're talking about right now, and some of the coverage of things like, people my age, because I'm also young, are a lot more sensitive to the interpersonal struggles that a 20 to 25-year-old is going through, adjusting to life as a professional and an athlete and, a face of the franchise or something. And I think that does, you're right, that does get lost in some of maybe, and this is just me caping up for young people, because I have to do that. I am a young person. But I think you see a lot of that get lost. The older, like that older crotchety football writer crowd that I've talked a lot about in this podcast that bothers me in general. But I think there's something to that there, that what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know that we can go directly on generational lines. I do know that there's some people, and some of them are prominent, that weren't around in a time where if a player disagreed with something that you said or wrote, that player couldn't turn around, open up their phone, and to 80,000 people immediately clarify, their point of view. And so it's tough for some of those people to adjust. And it's not, and you'll get criticized, it's like, oh, this guy's in the bag with this particular player, but that's not true. I mean, it's really the job of, of a lot of people to provide what that player says, not filtered through an agency or through a team source, but hey, this guy feels this way about this situation, and then everybody else can make the decision. And so it's and I know I'm assuming since you had me on, we're going to talk Takesman at some point during this conversation, but that skews it as well because there are people who every Sunday or every other day have to have these incendiary takes that oftentimes contradict each other or are wildly inaccurate or just pointless in general. And that ends up dictating our discussion as like a sports world. And then later on that day, we're all like, wait, this is stupid. This is all really dumb. And so that hurts the conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I let's just get into the Takesman thing. This is a natural transition there. And I think that this is why I like you so much, because of this sort of discussion right here. And so what is, like, define the Takesman? What is, like, you kind of got into a little bit, but give it a little more detail here.
Well, like a card carrying Takesman is someone who either generally disingenuously, or is their actual belief that that a football player, basketball player, baseball player, someone for one particular reason is a bad person that you should disregard entirely because either they put a hat on the wrong way or they had an odd response to a particular question. And it's never really something that we would consider based on reason, but for somebody who's not really aware of a player or a situation, it's like, oh, well maybe this person is bad. Maybe Cam Newton handing that ball to fans is really just a shot into his dark place where he only cares about himself. And it's something that's frequently done, not just with Cam, let's say Aaron Rodgers or really anybody that's prominent. And it tends to go at quarterbacks a lot because quarterbacks are the people that people know, and that drives traffic to websites and it drives people to the comment sections. And that's what the Takesman wants, is attention. And there's a discussion on whether or not pointing that out is giving them more attention. It doesn't work if you ignore them because people still continue to discuss the Takesman. So I kind of feel like it's important to say, hey, this is stupid for the following reasons, and then people can make their own decisions on how to treat Takesman. But sometimes it's pretty obvious, and they'll come out on one side and then come out on the other side, and it's really just to kind of suck you in and draw you into their takey layer, where they will punish you with more takes that don't really have an application to the actual world.
Right, and two things on my end from that. One, like, you mentioned a good point about, like, is it better to ignore? Is it better to acknowledge? Because that's something that I struggle with a lot. And, like, we have a group message, like an IM chat at work, and you're in there with all the guys from the Fantasy Stronghold. And frequently I'll come in there with a take that has annoyed me on Twitter. And I'll come in and start complaining about it. And you often will tell me, well, just talk about it on Twitter, like take it to Twitter. And I don't, for this, that, or the other reason, because I struggle with that, like whether it's better to ignore or to engage. But you're right. Ignoring it does not make it go away. Like, nobody's going to ever ignore a Takesman enough for them to just suddenly go out of business. But I guess maybe I think it's off my persona on Twitter to do that. I don't know. Maybe it's an interesting dilemma for me. But and then the other point I wanted to make, and what I view from, like, my end of the Takesman, and that term is totally credit to you, because when I heard it, I was like, it's one of those things you hear it and you just, yes. I have wanted to, that is a thing I have wanted to say. I have thought it. I've believed it. It's been a part of my set of my like lexicon, but now like I've never put it into a word. And when I heard you say it, I was like, damn, that's good. And so somebody sent me, and I re-tagged you in this article when the person sent it to me was from an article from the Atlantic, and it was basically, the quote was, "A take is an opinion that has no aspiration to a belief, an impression that never hardens into a position." And I think that's, when I read those words, it's like, that's, and it makes sense why the person sent it to me, because it's like, that's exactly right.
100%.
Yeah, and I mean, because that's what bugs me so much about the takesman and take culture, is that it's just saying something to say something, or to saying something to make it as hot as possible and get people, to react to it. When I so much more as a content creator value somebody that puts thought into something, crafts it into a well-rounded opinion, and it has some application, not just like you said, yeah, this player puts his hat on backwards, and what is, that says a lot right there. Well, what the hell does that really say? I don't know. So it's definitely something that I jive with you well on.
Yeah, I worry when somebody opens an article about sports, and this goes. I'm not mentioning, like, say, a feature about somebody that's supposed to tug at heartstrings. It's kind of the antithesis of that. Somebody would write an article, to instruct you on how to feel about something. And it's just kind of like, wait, like, I'm a person, like, I had feelings my whole life. Like, why do I need to be told how to feel about, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson or really anybody, or their private and personal relationships, and then like some sort of loop to how that pertains to football, when really all of it doesn't really coalesce into anything, and it's definitely not fact. And it's it's an opinion that goes to bed and has dreams about becoming a fact, but will never be one.
Yeah, it's just a take, and we have these think pieces about everything, like what, and there's certainly a lot of double standards, and I think actually this is a shout out to Denny Carter, who we had on the last episode of the podcast, and he mentioned, I remember him saying back in when Kirk Cousins did that, you like that thing, in the middle of the season, and how it became this very viral like thing that was like, everybody, oh, this is so cool, look at him, like he's showing he's impassioned. And I remember Denny saying after that, he's like, because Denny is very opinionated, especially if you listen to the last episode, he was like, if Cam Newton or, Jameis Winston or somebody did that, we'd be talking about, like, we'd have think pieces littering our timelines about, how ghetto culture has made its way into the NFL. So there's a lot of double standards with the takesman as well.
Yeah, and kind of the nature of the take industry leads us to a lot of those double standards falling on the same side every single time. And so that's, I mean, obviously me, the elephant in the room there, I don't really have any other perspective than being a black man in America. And so, and I know you and DC talked about this on the last podcast, like what issues you approach on Twitter. It's really easy for me to decide to approach those topics, because at a certain point they boil down. It's like, well, anything that I feel like would dehumanize me, I'm proud of my humanity. Like, I don't think it's something that I should have to prove. Anything that I feel like goes into that realm is a place where I feel like, it's important for people to chime in and say, like, hey, this is bad. Like,
Right.
Let's get to the truth of what you're trying to say here, when you say these things about people. And so that's where I fall in terms of the Twitter discussion that made for, and for those of you who follow me after this podcast, I'm sorry, because it's not always important stuff. A lot of the times it's stupid stuff, but that's really the only time that I'll get into things being important is talking about the way people are treated, as far as humans. And I'm a big fan of humans being treated equally. And so that's one topic that I'll put a cape on for. Everything else, the takesman and stuff like that, I'll try to have fun with it, because that's the best way to deal with it. Because any other time on the internet, you appear to be angry. People are going to say, you mad, bro, and say like, this guy's angry. But, you get stuff. Yeah, but something like Colin Kaepernick and Cam Newton are basically the same player. Um, I was able to have a whole lot of fun off of that, and hopefully point out that stuff like that is kind of stupid.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You don't have to, like, things don't have to make you mad and you have to have this emotional, like, outraged reaction to it. You can just point out how stupid it is by exaggerating, in fact, how very stupid it is, and I think that's an important way to handle it. I remember, I think at one point during the season, like when Ezekiel Elliott said his thing about what was he like? I don't even remember, but he like questioned the play calling or something. And of course, then thousands of think pieces had to be written about what, like, is Ezekiel Elliott, like, was this a revealing moment of how he's a bad teammate? And you posted the GIF of, like, I think the Michigan State kicker, like when he's doing the big celebrations, like when you're a TakeMe, you see Ezekiel Elliott say that, you just you go nuts. I mean, that's
they have to do that because player who runs ball wanted to run ball more doesn't really elicit the reaction they're looking for. So it's like, our team's going to be afraid of Ezekiel Elliott now, or like Cardale Jones tweeted his opinion. Our team's mad. It's just
right.
Like, let's kind of be real about this for a second. Hopefully, teams are determining what a player can do and what contributions he can have to a football team and what their needs are. And it's not like guys pouring through tweets like, we're trying to, you're not, this isn't jury selection. this is football.
Right. It's football. And listen, if you're a team that can't handle bringing in a quarterback like Cardale Jones because he said something that he thought, something that it's pretty damn good. Like, for one, it's a pretty damn good point.
Yeah. If we're polling America, it's probably maybe 35 or 40% of people would be in line with Cardale's opinion, and it's and that's that the NCAA is able to exploit athletes, and that they make billions of dollars, and it's a point to be made. We're not going to get into whether or not it's factual or not, but it's a belief that he has on a personal experience, and if teams are afraid of that, then good on Cardale. I don't think he would want to play for a team that is going to try to censure him and say that there's things he can't or cannot say about his personal life. That's extreme, and I doubt anybody's really knocking him for a rather innocuous tweet.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we talk about on the outside. It's probably not as big of a deal, but Claybon, I really want to thank you for joining today. Kind of a shorter episode than normal because you are a very busy man after all. You've got the news is coming in constantly, as we mentioned, from the NFL, and you've got to go back out there and report on it and help break it. But so, Claybon, before I always give the guest the floor to say anything they want to say before I yank it out from under you. So just go right ahead.
Oh wow, I've obtained the floor. I'm just gonna say thank you. Thank you for doing everything that you do in terms of perception, backyard banter, and the podcast in general, because you're bringing a lot of different perspectives to a lot of people, and those people, some of them are going to be the guys like CD or me, or like where he was telling the story about being in a fantasy league with Chris Wessling. And it's like, here I am sitting next to Chris Wessling, and
Right.
I'm having this conversation with you now. And there's people that are probably watching this who are going to be reading some articles that are one day going to be like, yeah, I was watching the Backyard Banter podcast. And so just know that you're doing good stuff, and everybody out there that's grounded like Matt, you guys are doing really good stuff, and don't give up because people are telling you it's not important enough or it's a stupid thing. If you're doing something that you like doing, you should keep doing that. And eventually, if you're doing that, somebody's going to pay you. Hopefully people do that.
I couldn't agree more, and you're right. I never lose sight of the fact that it's the coolest thing ever, and I hope that someday somebody does get to experience that. Like, because I think I remember when I did the ATN podcast, like as a trivia show back in 2013, and like now I work with those guys. And I was like psyched that I went on. So I hope somebody else gets that feeling from this podcast and further. So thank you, Claybon, so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. And everybody out there listening, if you would please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on iTunes, continuing to give feedback. It's been tremendous so far, and this thing is only getting better. So I really appreciate you all, whatever you do for the podcast. And thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you learned something.